At our health retreat, we often have people come with gut problems. We might go a few months and not have a person with a gut problem, severe one, and then we might have a couple in a row, but there are a few stories that I'd like to share with you. And I'm particularly talking about inflammation in the gastrointestinal tract, particularly the large and sometimes the small colon. Whether it be gastritis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, they are all inflammation of the gut. And really and truly the same guidelines help them all. I'd like to tell you about a particularly interesting one where a man came with his wife. They were both in their late 60s. The wife had come because she had some health problems, and I said to the man in our initial consultation, what is your reason for coming to Misty Mountain Health Retreat? And he pointed to his wife and he said, her. She wanted me to come. So that was the main reason he was here. And as I was going through his health assessment, I asked him if he was on medication. He said, yes, I'm on cortisone and I'm on anti-inflammatories because I have Crohn's disease. I said, how long have you had Crohn's disease? He said, 20 years. He said, recently the doctor told me there was no more they could do for me. How many times do you usually go to the bathroom in a day? I said. Well, he said, I always go 4 times on my morning walk. He said, I walk down near the beach and I know exactly where the toilets are. He said, so I usually go again late morning. I usually go again in the afternoon. So he said, I average about 6 toilet visits a day. I said, do you have pain? He said, yes, I have quite a bit of cramping just before I'm about to go to the toilet. I said, do you ever have bleeding? He said, yes, almost daily. I said, are your bowel movements formed or liquid? He said, they're liquid. I said, how long has it been like this? He said, well, the bleeding's really only started in the last year. He said, I've had pain for many years. I said to him, what do you eat for breakfast? He said, for breakfast I have usually cereal, and I like milk and sugar on that. I usually have a couple of slices of toast, wheat toast with butter and jam and a cup of coffee. Mid-morning, he said, I usually have another cup of coffee and I have a couple of biscuits or cake. For lunch, he has sandwiches, usually white bread, butter, ham and cheese, another cup of coffee, maybe a cake. Mid-afternoon, coffee, cake. In the evening, he usually has meat and potatoes, often a dessert, maybe ice cream. He said, but something I love at night, after my coffee, he said, I have a couple of Jack Daniels. I said, as I wrote down his program. I said to him, would you like us to try something while you're here? He said, well, I've got nothing to lose. Okay. So I put him on slippery elm. Every morning at 8 o'clock, I put him on slippery elm, middle of the day, slippery elm about 6 at night, and slippery elm just before he went to bed. The first 2 days at our retreat are juicing days. I wondered how he'd go. On Monday, that's the first juicing day, I said, how are you going? He said, good. I had my usual 4 bowel movements on my morning walk. I just stayed close to the bathrooms. Tuesday morning, I said, how are you this morning? He said, interesting. He said, I only went twice this morning instead of 4 times. He said, I'm not having the cramping that I usually have, the pain and the cramping. And he said, the bleeding seems to have stopped. 3rd day, that's Wednesday, that's when our guests eat. I said, how are you today? He said, I'm very good. He said, no bleeding, no cramping. He said, my bowel motions are starting to take a little bit of form. Friday. I said, how are you going? He said, I'm going very well. He said, I have no more pain. He said, I have no more bleeding. And he said, and I've been to the bathroom 3 times today instead of my usual 6. And he said, my stools are starting to show form. I said to him, I believe if you would consider it, it's your choice, to stop the anti-inflammatories, because the fact that you're having these results tells me the inflammation has greatly reduced. He stopped his anti-inflammatories on Friday. Saturday, things were still good. In fact, Sunday morning he came running up to me just before breakfast and he said, I have not gone. He said, I'm astonished. He said, I came here for my wife's health and yet I have received healing. He said, what should I do with the cortisone? I said, you have to go off that very, very slowly. My suggestion is to wait a week, continue this lifestyle, continue what you've learned here. No more sugars, no more alcohol, no more coffee, no more wheat. We showed him that he could use the ancient grain bread, the sourdough spelt. Instead of coffee in the mid-morning, he was having peppermint tea. He was even considering a plant-based diet, things that he would never have considered on the first day. He contacted me 3 months later. He said, it is 3 months now and I have successfully ceased the last of my cortisone. He said, I never believed this was possible because my doctor said it was not possible. I'm not criticizing the doctor. They do play a role in a crisis, but the doctor has not had experience with the slippery elm. He said to me, I'm now just taking slippery in the morning, slippery elm before I go to bed at night. I have no pain. He said, I have no cramping. He said, when people offer me a sugar cake, I smile and say, no thanks. I know what that's going to do for me. So quickly this body had responded, in a body that was not even looking for healing, a body that the doctors had given up on. So you can see the main points are important to be well hydrated, important to stop the 5 known irritants to the gut, which is refined sugar, dairy products, peanuts, oats, and the hybridized wheat. Now, one of the first things one may go back on when they're healed is to try the oats, because oats sit okay with some people, but not with others. You're the doctor there.